Kevin Welsh, I want to talk about Musica Pristina. That's another business you have that's fascinating to me because it's in the audio area and I have a passion for all that. And I'd like you to talk about how you got into it and what it involved.
Time frame was about 2010. I sold a copyright in my main business and had a little bit of, some recreational funds available, right? And I'm a huge audio fan myself, and I started to do some research on, what's the good gear, right? What's the really good stuff that's out there? And one of the things that I stumbled on that I did not believe was true was that power supplies in digital audio make a difference. And when I read it, it just didn't sit well with me because a 0 is a 0 and a 1 is a 1. And it seemed like it should just be that simple, that it doesn't matter how exactly you power the device, it's just checking zeros and ones, and that should be it. So in the very early days, I was just on this mission to prove that wrong, really. Mm-hmm. So I did a bunch of research. I called engineering firms to ask people if this was true or if this was just snake oil in the audiophile world, right? I didn't believe it. I did stumble on a really interesting article in HD Video where when 4K was just starting to come onto the scene, and they were having a hard time developing devices that could record the video without errors. And they found that higher quality power supplies were fixing those errors. So that was the first piece that I got that was maybe there's something here. So some engineering firm in California, the guy that worked there said he knew a guy from years and years ago named Dave Davenport, and Dave might have some answers for me. And so it turns out Dave lives about 2.5 miles away from me.
Wow.
Yeah, this is one of those synchronicity type of interesting things, right? So I called him and I, spoke to him for about 30 minutes. And one of the takeaways was, you have to use your own ears, right? So I went on some of the industrial websites. I found a couple of different power supplies. And I tried them, right? So I built computers with these industrial linear power supplies, and I did notice that it sounded different, and I didn't know how or why, but it was different. I've got that entrepreneurial bug, and so just as much as I wanted to buy my own gear, I thought, wow, this is a really fascinating space to play in. So we started, I think it was around 2013, we started building what they call servers, where the device stored the music and played it to an external digital to analog converter. And then as time went on, I bumped into a couple of other interesting synchronicities and started to realize that the computer, when it comes to digital audio, it's just a really dirty environment. Electrically speaking, processors and RAM creates a bunch of noise that goes backwards into those power supplies, and everything gets polluted. And so you don't have to filter noise that you don't create. So I started to do some research on low power processors that didn't have the noise of an i7, that didn't have all this sort of extra computing power, right? It just needs to be able to process the audio and send it out. So that was how this all got going.
And describe to people what it is.
Okay, sure. So everyone I'm sure is familiar with a CD player.
Yeah.
And the standard idea of a CD player is the digital music is on a disc and you put it in. The disc spins, a laser reads it. Now you have a digital audio signal, and that digital signal has to get converted into an analog signal, and that happens in a chip that's called a DAC, a digital to analog converter. And then now it's an analog signal, and it goes out the usually red and white RCA connectors, and then they go into an amp and get amplified, and then that amplified signal goes to speakers and you hear it, right? So a CD player does a bunch of different functions. It takes the stored media,
which is zeros and ones,
in one
stored
format,
in an optical
right, in an optical readable way, right? It reads it, it does the digital to analog conversion, and then it sends it out to the next device.
Right.
So what we make is sort of a piece of that puzzle. Usually what you'll do is you'll have your music on some computer-based device, a hard drive or a server or some kind of device on the network. There are now resolutions that are better than CD quality. So CD quality is 44.1 kilohertz, 16 bits. And so now we have up to 32-bit 768 kilohertz for PCM, which is one flavor, and there's another flavor called DSD, which is based on Sony's SACD format. It's like a high-resolution audio disc. So our device takes that digital audio signal off of the network.
High quality.
Right. I mean, it can be CD quality, but ideally a higher quality. But CD is also not bad at all, right? And then the device takes that signal, takes that data, the zeros and ones that are sequential. We have built our own clock, so there's an extremely accurate clock. The jitter, which is the inaccuracies, is measured in femtoseconds, which is, if you remember, milli, micro, on down the line to femto is tiny, tiny, tiny little amounts of jitter in that signal. So it takes the data and clocks it. There's a format called I²S, and that's what happens inside of a CD player. And then we send that signal out on an HDMI cable that carries I²S. That's called the PS Audio standard. We also have an AES EBU output, which is typically used in Pro Audio, but audiophile devices use it also, and a couple of other output formats. And then it's up to the next device to convert that digital back to analog, right? So our device is essentially, they call it a streamer or a network player, takes network-based digital audio and clocks it. And so the goal is to make that digital audio signal just as absolutely accurate as the recording as it can possibly be.
And you mentioned if it doesn't sync perfectly, you don't get the full richness. So the average listener will go, oh, that sounds good. But then when you get all those timings correct, it brings another dimension to the sound.
You know, human hearing has evolved over thousands of years, right? So you know, it's a sense that's really, really accurate. We just don't think about it so much. So if you walk into a dark bathroom in the middle of the night, you get the sense of the shape and the size of that room.
For survival.
Right. For survival reasons, it's absolutely, you have to sort of be able to pick up your surroundings to some degree with your eyes closed. And even in this room, we get a sense of the dimensions and the shape of the room. And so it only takes two mics to create that stereo recording. And that stereo recording has three-dimensional data in it, right? It has information about the reflections and how long, you know, how long the lag is from the first time you hear a cymbal till the second time that you hear a cymbal, and that starts to define the shape of the room. And so there's really not anything that you can do, aside from maybe cheating, to make something sound better than the recording. Right? You can play with EQ and do some things.
Probably create an effect like a room, but it's not the real room.
That's right. But that's not true, right? That's not true reproduction of what was recorded. So if you really want to hear exactly what was recorded, everything that we do as audio engineers, you know, it detracts from it, right? Everything makes it a little bit worse and a little bit worse and a little bit worse from that absolute perfection that's on the recording, right? So yeah, one of the things that happens when things are perfect or as right as they can be, you'll notice the room you're in transforms to match the shape of the room that audio was recorded in.
Wow.
So if there's a symphony and it was recorded in the symphony hall with two mics set up for stereo, you'll get that expansive sense of, you know, a huge sound stage and a really big room. If something's recorded in a church, you'll get that sense. If it's recorded in a smoky jazz club, you know, you'll get the sense that you're
smoke.
You'll get the sense. Well, yeah, maybe you'll even get to pick out the color of the lipstick on the singer. It's really good. So yeah, that was one of the things that truly amazed me, was to listen to, you know, because I had a home theater set up with 5-channel speakers, and you get the effect of something happening behind you. But when you get that effect out of 2-channel speakers, right, it's kind of eerie. I mean, you get this sense of vertigo that that your whole environment just got shifted by the sound.
Yeah, in a good
The
way.
sound of this music.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, in a really good way. Yeah.
And I love the comment of your daughter where you were testing some new equipment and you said, try these and you notice the difference. And she was like, Dad, you've got to be kidding.
Yeah, right.
This is like a whole
Right.
new dimension it gives.
Right.
Well, how can they learn more about your product?
Sure. So we're on the web at musicapristina.com.
Great.
There's a ton of information about the line of products and about our company and that kind of thing. You can find more there. You can find me, Kevin Welsh, on LinkedIn, and Musica Pristina is up on LinkedIn, and we have a Facebook page also, and we just recently started to post some things up on Instagram. So we're sort of out there on the web. You can find us.
And I hope to get more tips on the field from you too.
Yeah, thanks.
All about the process. It's fascinating. Great. Thanks so much.
Sure
Great
thing. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Great.